With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the webinar to Greg with Deep Roots Farm in Moscow. And Greg's going to give you his farmer perspective on whole farm planning and sustainability. So Greg, welcome. I'm going to stop my share and go ahead and allow you to share your screen.
All right. Thanks, Colette. Hopefully y'all can hear me. I'm kind of getting over a cold. Yeah, as Colette said, we run a farm here in Moscow, and we've gone through a lot of this same coursework when we were first starting out. It kind of all started when my wife and I, Marcy and I, were working for a nonprofit doing some farming, and it was right out of college, and we saw an opportunity to open our own farm. And part of that was due to the great markets here in Moscow, good soils and climate. So what we ended up putting together was a farm that was kind of ever growing for the first 5 years or so. Right now we cultivate about 2/3 of an acre, and we manage more buffer areas and different hedgerows around that. But actual production is 2/3. It's a diversified vegetable operation. We direct market pretty much everything we do, and we have 4 hoop houses. We grow a lot of greens and onions, and we do a lot of high value heat loving crops inside of those hoop houses. This is a picture of that first house that we built, and we've been in the process of making these larger, but those are crucial to our system. We're also in the process of kind of ramping up some more perennials, because everything we've pretty much done to this point has been annual vegetables. So small fruits, strawberries, and blueberries and asparagus are things that we're starting to add. This is kind of a timeline of how we got started, and it was really crucial to work on a number of farms as we were starting out and working part-time in starting our farm. We worked on collectively probably 4 or 5 other farms, and that was really, really beneficial to see how different things were, different problems were approached, and we could apply those to our own. We went full-time in 2012, and then we had an opportunity to bring a friend in that we'd farmed with previously in 15. And that was great because it allowed us to take a little step back from a few aspects, one being market and share some of the work. We are certified naturally grown. We chose that instead of the National Organic Program, just because we like the community that it is. It's a nonprofit that runs it, and farmers and extension agents come and inspect us, and so there's a nice transfer of knowledge through that, and basically same standards as certified organic. So this is the core partners, Marcy and I on the left, and then Isaac and his family. He runs his own site that he lives at. So right now we have 3 sites, and he lives at one and we live at one. Our place is kind of the home base, and then we have a small site that is off-site. So our place is the one in the upper left. We're all right in the city limits of Moscow. That was something that was important to us at the beginning. So we're transferring food around and shuttling it around as little as possible. We have run about 6 sites over the years, and that was just due to the land that was available to us. It was all leased. We now own our place, but I will say having all of those different sites probably is not sustainable over the long run, but it's what we needed to do when we were starting out. So now we've scaled back. We've gone through a number of scale backs in the last 3-4 years, and we aren't producing on the 1.25 acres that we were, but it's been neat to see how the economics and how the workload changes when you scale down. We're about half the size that we were. Um, uh, the site on the right, the two pictures on the right, is the largest farm that we operated a few years ago, south of town, and that was the only one out of town. Um, and so we had a lot of pressure from big ag fields around us. So there were different challenges there than there are in town. But it's been a cool process, and every year things shift around, and I think that's one of the big takeaways, is that nothing is really static, especially when you're working in nature. But with your own business, like there's numerous things that can be augmented every year, whether you choose them or not. So here's again those three pillars of sustainability. And I will say that we weren't always in the center here. And I think that that's a pretty normal thing in starting a business. But we always kept this in mind. And at the beginning, for the first maybe 3 years, we were probably sacrificing some of that quality of life for ourselves, just to get the thing off the ground. And what we would like to kind of be at right now is the bottom of this inner triangle, um, uh, and that's for multiple reasons. We just had a little girl, and so that's kind of the focus of our life right now. And so we want to make sure we have time for that, and try to maintain the business and the farm with the values that we started out with. But it's a give and a take, and you're always juggling all those things. So we'll delve into each one of those circles and how we approach them. And profit over the long term has always been something that we had our sights on, but we were I guess pleasantly surprised that even in our first year we felt like we were profitable. Wasn't much, mind you, but we didn't go into debt to do it. We only pulled a loan out in the second or third year, and it was a small loan at that. And so we felt really good about that. Vegetable farming on a small hand scale has a fairly low barrier to entry. And so we were able to do that and feel like we were making money pretty quickly. But like I said, we market our stuff. We started out with 2 farmers markets, midweek and a Saturday. Now we've focused down just to our Saturday, which is a really bustling market. And that is the bulk of our business. So we tailor a lot of the production around that. But we extend the season and do a winter market, which has been growing at a good rate for the last few years. And we also then do a community supported agriculture. So people buy in at the beginning of the year, and then we give them a box of vegetables every week. And that runs for the similar weeks of the year. Market Bucks is a similar program. We just have people sign up for a given amount, and then they come and they choose what they want at market, and we just deduct it. So both of those last 2 options give us working capital at the beginning of the year, which is a crucial time. There's a lot of money flowing out this time of the year, all the way until the markets start in May. Restaurant sales are pretty crucial for us as well. It makes up about 10% of what we do, and we have a lot of great restaurants here in town that really value local ag and supporting local farms. And so we have probably a unique situation with that. But if you go out and you seek a lot of these chefs that are really wanting to work with fresh, interesting varieties, they will pay a premium, and that can be really crucial to getting your name out in a different group in a community. And then over the years, we've also sold to food co-op, just like a grocery store. We aren't doing that right now because we are focusing on as much of that direct as we can. And in our downsizing, we didn't feel like we had the capacity to continue that in much of a way. So that's an example of, just deciding what is working for you at the given time. So stewardship of land, air, water, and resources has always been something that has been real important to us. We were natural resources graduates, and so farming seemed like a good fit. Enabled us to work outside and also apply and actually feel like we were doing something positive towards some of the problems that we see in the world. And a lot of those problems can derive from agriculture. I mean, a big part of the way land is used is how we eat and how we produce that food. And so we wanted to try and make a small little difference in our community by doing it in a way that that is really hands-on and is a lot of hard work, but is really valued in our community, and we feel good about what we're doing. So some of the things that we do around that to kind of achieve feeling like we're being good stewards is protecting the soil. And so the picture on the left is a buckwheat cover crop. So we're doing multiple things, and I think that's the second takeaway that I want to really stress is everything that we try to do, we try to identify how we can get something done that's also benefiting another aspect. So with this buckwheat cover crop, I mean, we're not only providing great pollinator habitat that will help pollinate our other crops, our actual cash crops, but we are providing habitat for them, and those beneficials help us in other ways in dealing with other pests. And then the cover crop itself is covering the soil, keeping that soil in place, taking up nutrients so that mobile nutrients are not being leached out in big rain events, and adding, once we turn this into the soil, it's adding organic matter and those nutrients back in. And so we're bettering the soil from a till standpoint, a mechanical standpoint, but also the soil biology, we're feeding that and keeping that as active as we can. So we really try to keep a lot of roots in the ground as much as we can, because that is what you see in nature. Whenever you see bare soil is easily erodible. It's not as living and as active as we would like, and that is a big problem around the world. So, like I said, this is creating habitat. So another really neat aspect that in the last few years we've been delving into is educating ourselves on different bugs and their life cycles, whether they're pests or beneficials. So these bugs on the back of a kale plant, we're trying to identify what they are, where we might be able to intervene if we feel like we need to. So that goes into setting up thresholds. Certain amount is okay, but there are certain outbreaks that we need to deal with, and whether we just start over and work that crop under. That is a big technique that we use. Occasionally we will use some organic certified compliant materials and sprays. Neem oil is one of them. Garlic barrier is another. So we'll use that stuff sometimes, but then you're just adding more inputs, and so we try to minimize that. We do a lot of cultural controls to combat bugs, so using row cover and different timings of the year can help. So those are all aspects of working within this natural system that you're going to get bugs sometimes, and you figure out where you start to intervene. The lower right, tarps are one way that we kind of use to prep ground, keep the ground covered again. If we don't have time for cover crop, then this is a good option. We're keeping moisture in the soil, which is something that we're going to have to deal with more and more over the years. So that's a good option that we're employing. And then multi-use again, the hoop house on the right is our nursery, and we use it with tables in the early spring and heat it, and then we pull those tables out and grow in the ground. So really stacking the use of tools is a good way to stretch your resources, make them work for multiple things. And then that last bubble, quality of life. Like I said, we're dabbling more in this in the last few years because we kind of put it by the side for the first few years. But really getting out and recreating is a big thing for us. So we want to try to find time, even in the summer when it's hard to. Like I said, we just had Shannon there, so that's taking up a lot of our time. But we kind of wanted to set this up in a way that would hopefully make that work. And it'll be a juggle. We haven't gone through a season yet with her, but it'll be pretty neat to bring her up on the farm. And then doing house remodels that are long overdue. We had to get that. I had a bathroom was falling off, and so that may not fit totally into the recreation aspect, but it's making our life easier now that it's said and done. So it can make a season crazy, but it's well worth it in the long run. Other things to consider, I think, are just bringing in the community wherever you feel like you can. People really want to be involved and learn about farming and food, and I think it's partly our job to bring that aspect in wherever we can. A lot of times we don't want people on the farm. That's sometimes the reason we started farming, but we have a great community that really supports us in a huge way. And so by doing things like a workshop, which this was, it can not only help a little bit with the bottom line, but it gets people involved. And that's been a huge benefit to have a solid group behind you. And then tool sharing is what's going on the right here. We're a small enough farm. Not every tool makes sense for us to own. So we share certain things with other farmers. And that can really help economically. So here's our farm mission statement. And we developed one when we first started. And I think every year, maybe except for this last year, we kind of have adjusted it. So Deep Roots Farms is in Moscow, Idaho, grows vegetables, fruits, and eggs using techniques that promote biodiversity on their farm. We practice intensive planting rotation to create diversity for plant health while increasing production on a small base. So that encompasses what it is. That's the nutshell. And you can tell people that they get an idea of what it is you do. As we kind of drill down in deeper, farm goals then detail some more of this stuff out. And I will say these, I would say, change a little bit more often, or we update them a little bit more. But you can see same kind of things. We value time for our bodies and friends and family, and a big thing, and Colette mentioned it, is to continue doing this and having the lifestyle that we have. We do need to make a living. So to do that without being a complete slave to the farm, and you may feel like it, you will feel like it every year at certain points. But to do that without it taking hold of your whole life is important. So to keep that in check. And really, like we always joke as farmers, like the thing's not going to die if we don't spend the day on the farm. So that's an important thing to remember. New things for us are trying to do a sparingly amount of tillage. And this just goes into that soil biology that we want to always be fostering and trying not to disturb as much as we can. So that one's a recent one. There's things about here on what variety of crops about midway down we use and how they fit with our climate and on a market farm, like are they easy to harvest? Things such as where we sell. And then the bottom one, really important, being it is a changing system. We're always learning, and we want to try and use that knowledge to adapt our system to benefit ourselves and each one of those three bubbles. Um, so it's okay to change, and it's needed. So this all creates a framework for you to help make decisions. And like I said, monitoring pests and learning about their cycles, can help you decide when to intervene. Um, you know, this goes into almost everything we do on a day-to-day basis. And that is one of the neat things about a small farm is you can get your hands on, or at least see everything on a daily basis if you make a point. And I would say it's beneficial to make a point on that, catching things before they get out of control. So all these thresholds play into your decisions, and they've been crucial in us deciding what crops to grow, which ones to cut out in given years. Up on the right picture, we have over the years decided to grow less crops that require this white row cover, just because we don't really like using the row cover. It is another input, and when the wind blows, it blows off, and it's a pain. So what crops can we cut out? And we've cut out a lot of brassicas, broccolis, and cabbage, because we don't want to deal with this stuff that much. We still do, but if we can minimize it, it helps. And then deciding when's enough. Is it worth harvesting another few bunches of cilantro, or is it just better to take a break and take a nap in there? All these, you'll come across these on a daily aspect, and you may not think back to your goals or your mission, but if you've talked about it, put them on paper, it will kind of help guide you subconsciously through a day in deciding enough's enough for a certain crop. This slide goes into and comes a lot from The Lean Farm, a book by Ben Hartman. And he's all about the efficiency and trying to apply, bigger business efficiencies down to a farm. And I would say, like, a lot of these things we've been doing, and they all come out of planning. But a big, that first one is probably the biggest. Don't overproduce what you can sell, what you can harvest or manage. And if you do get in a situation, which you will, then you decide to cut your loss before it turns into a problem. Then the next two, identifying, controlling costs, and identifying certain tools to help save time, minimize movement, all of that. That's time well worth, spending in the season and in the winter. There are things that you won't be able to know beforehand, but if you can kind of think about where you spend most of your time, that will help you tackle those areas and address, hopefully reducing that time, whether that's a tool you need or changing workflow or how you approach something. Trying to level out a load, produce even amount throughout the season is a one way to do it. It's hard in a short season. Trying not to experiment too much, and then again continually improving what you're doing, and try to do that when things are going good. When you're just putting out fires, you're not going to be thinking about systems and how to make things easier. And then just keep as much as you can standard and orderly. So we do a lot of that. Just even with washing heads of lettuce, put them in a orderly fashion. Packing them is going to be easier and faster. The trailer, the picture of the trailer is something of an example of a tool that really helped us minimize our time. So then knowing when to call it is something we talked about already, but here's two examples. This paper mulch we used when we were growing a lot of onions, and it helped combat annual weed pressure. But once that weed pressure was under control a few years down the road, we decided we don't want to use this stuff. The wind blows it off and it's a pain. So we stopped using it. One thing we were trying to level our load out with was working over the whole year rather than just for the growing season, and we thought the milk goats would do this for us. And unfortunately, it was a short stint, and we got rid of them because they needed the same attention at the same time that all the vegetables did in the early morning. And so it didn't work for us, but we tried it, did the numbers, we did the time to research it, tried it, and then decided, okay, this isn't working. Let's change gears. So overall, I think big takeaways is this is big picture stuff, and it'll help you kind of sort out some of the details later. And it really comes down to your values and goals. Everything's going to be trial and error, but the plan you can refer to back, and it'll help you kind of make some key decisions. Having a community behind you will help you through some of the tough times, as well as having this plan. And come back to it often, change it, see what's working, what it isn't, and always try to do some little tweak every year to try to make things a little bit better. And really value your time and what you do. Too many times farmers devalue their time, and none of us will continue doing this if we do that. And so that goes into pricing and a whole other realm of things, but really value your time and try to figure out how to pay yourself. So with that, we'll have
Thank you.
questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Greg. So I wanted to let our audience know that we are going to add a link to the Certified Naturally Grown website and to information about the Lean Farm in the student resources component of your webpage. So you'll have that information. We do have a question, Greg, about Certified Naturally Grown. Can you say a little bit more about what that program is and how it works?
Yeah, Certified Naturally Grown is a nonprofit over on the East Coast. It came out of the movement that, Certified Organic is an organic program that is administered by the government, and this came out and was felt like was needed because some of the organic standards, the national organic standards, some people feel like have been watered down a little bit, and is tailored a little bit, or becoming more tailored towards larger farms, and so this was a grassroots movement, came out of that, and it is not government inspected. It is inspected by extension agents, other farmers. Like we have the duty to inspect other farms, and that creates a lot of good knowledge transfer of what's going on, rather than an inspector just checking boxes and saying you did this or you didn't do this. It's more affordable for our multiple site situation that we have. It was more affordable to go that route, and our customers just didn't really feel like they were demanding certified organic. Certified naturally grown was the alternative, and so that was the route that we went. Like I said, a lot of the standards are extremely similar, if not the same. But the onus is on us to really show that we're, using what we say we're using and not going above that, but really trying to be the best steward that we can.
Great. Thank you. It's a great program, and I think in our community of Moscow, people are really starting to understand what certified naturally grown means.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll add that information to the students' webpage for this course. Thank you. We have one more question before we turn it back over to our local sites. So Taylor and Kaylee are asking, how do you terminate your cover crops, like your field peas?
Yeah, it really depends on what the cover crop is. There are some, like a winter rye, that can be quite hard to terminate, and that one, you you're just resorting to tillage. So we've struggled and we've backed off on some of the cover crops lately because we've tried to minimize the tillage. But things like buckwheat and Phacelia will winter kill. So we try to focus on certain ones that will winter kill, and then they just create a mat. And in the spring, we're able to scratch the surface or do whatever prep we need. Certain ones can be killed by putting a tarp on for quite a while, or mowing and then putting a tarp on. We're using a lot of clovers, a Dutch white clover to be specific lately, and we're undersowing that under certain crops like kale. And that one we try to carry through for a couple years, and that's another one that eventually we probably will be tilling in, unless we have a long period where we can put a tarp on it. But certain, I think crimson clover, if you mow it right at bloom stage, then it usually kills it for the most part. So a combination of mowing, tillage, and winter kill, and just covering.
All right, thank you. Okay, so this really is the last question, but we had one more question come in, and I think it's a quick one. Do you have a heat source in the hoop house?
Yeah, the picture there that we've got up, you can see a wood stove. That's what we started out with. It's a big barrel stove. And that was great. That's what we had at the time when we built this. It's a small enough structure that actually would overheat that. The downside is I was getting up sometimes a couple times a night to stoke it. And we have 10, 15, 20 burns a season in the beginning of the year. So that led to some less sleep starting out the year. So we switched to a pellet stove. And that's what's in there now. And now that we're sizing these houses up, we may be switching to a propane or natural gas. We'll see how the pellet stove manages the space. But we wanted to go with wood to begin with because we feel like that's the more sustainable way. But just comes down to mechanics and volume inside these houses and whether the pellets can keep up.
Okay, great. Thank you, Greg. I really want to thank you for joining us today, and I believe you will be joining us in February for the crops workshop.
Yes.
So that'll be excellent. And we have a couple other questions that I think are going to come in, but I will forward those to you by email so that you could maybe talk about those particular things when you join us next month.
Great.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you so much. So Greg is going to stop sharing his screen, and I'm going to go back to sharing mine.